Just saying no does not build a case. In common law, we stand on our claims. If we haven't made claims via lawful notice in written form, then it's harder to stand on those claims because your spoken word is then against another's, and it's harder to prove notice was given. And giving notice is respectful. Giving notice is lawful, and it's also legal. So you have to give notice. That's why businesses will give notice to those that changes are going to impact. Without standing, we have no right to speak on the matter. Lawyers have no place in a common law argument because they have no firsthand testimony, and that matters. Except for if we have agreed to take the knee and be knighted by a king or queen that would make the man become the knight and no longer be able to fight as who he originally was, for then he has to take into account the needs of the man that has knighted him and given him the status. If suits or statuses are allowed to speak for, represent us to be our persons, instead of us as men and women be present, we've consented to be wards. And wards of the court or system do not get the final vote in their own affairs, like I experienced under what I believe to be the modern day witch hunt, legalized and normalized under the Mental Health Act. And then, in fact, I say in my book and other times too, at what point does the Mental Health Act become the Health Act? And how are we not yet considering that as a fact? Because if we don't take a stand now, that could be a reality I want nothing to do with. And I would not want that reality imposed on you either. For reality, by my definition, is realistic evidence appearing legit in tomorrow's yesterday. For now is all we have. Hidden hands make that a dangerous proposition. If the ones speaking for you, representing you as your person, have hidden alliances or made allegiances or oaths that you don't know anything about, that matters not when they close the door and sign on your behalf on a deal that would not be in your best interest, but they benefit from. There is a great deal of corruption that if you blindly trust, your trust will be capitalized on, which is why another definition for person is trust. It is literally a trust. That is why it is a charge applied for an offense. But if a corpse is offended, and they're a dead entity that's being empowered by men and women who are claiming the offense. It is the man or woman that is claiming the offense that is actually causing you harm, loss, or fraud if they are acting on behalf of the corpse claiming offense for a crime that has no victim until they said they were victimized in the name of the corpse they worked for. They're liable, responsible, and accountable for choosing to uphold that fraud and cause loss or harm to me, the woman, such as in the matter I am dealing with via lawful notice until the trial, which they've not yet gained jurisdiction over me to be able to apply their rules. So any man or woman participating in or moving that false claim in a public court against me to defame my name will pay personally in their private capacity, for that is where I have put them all on notice. Accountability, responsibility, and liability, we can hyphenate all of these. The terms lawful and legal differ in that lawful contemplates the substance of law, where legal alludes to the form of law, like I expressed in the past slide. A man or woman must be converted into a status that must conform to the social norms or be deemed a threat to public safety. Statuses are public, men and women can be private or public. But our highest standing is in the private, which is why in the inverted and converted and corrupted system, such as the military, for instance, private is the lowest status because it makes the men and women that are working within that system think being a private is nothing, because you get crapped on by everyone that is above that has a higher rank, because it's actually the reverse. When not carrying arms to cause harm to other men and women on behalf of the corpse, that the one that feels less than to actually be in their highest capacity in the private, then believes that status to be less. It's a mind game in this whole psyop, which is a psychological operation we've all been subjected to. Yet, if we agree to be the subject of it instead of just subjected to it, it goes from a verb to a noun. And that is where the statuses of the crown come in that put us under the jurisdiction and domain of the one that created the rules and therefore owned the creation that those rules are applied to. Accountability is the quality or state of being accountable, especially an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. Responsibility is the state or fact of having a duty to deal with something or of having control over someone. And liability, with an extra E, for the energy that we put into the corpse that we empower with our life force in order for it to have the power that we've given it and then apply to other men and women that we will pay for causing harm, loss, and fraud against if they know how to hold us as the representatives of the corpse liable, responsible, and accountable for our choice to uphold mandates, edicts, and other rules that would do damage that we agreed to uphold on behalf of a dead entity. Liability is the state of being responsible for something, especially by law, a person or thing which is not a man or a woman, because it is something other than that, which is not in fact written in the codes at all, because the corpse has no jurisdiction over what is real, which is why a social media profile, for instance, must be created in order for the man or woman to have an interface to deal with a virtual reality. Well, our social media profile, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, whatever you want to see your social media profile that you have to be, that you know is not you, yet your person is the equivalent. Your status or your title is the same to interact with the corporation, whether that be in the name of govern, control, meant of the mind, or a corporation that orates its rules and then says that you are the employee of it. So no longer are you the woman, you or man, you are the employee that is bound to those rules. But what if you were a woman that works, a woman that is employed? See how the status changes the verb into a position that is rigid and comes with expectations, which are the leading cause of disappointments? A liability is something a person or company owes, usually a sum of money, though it can also be a product or it can be a piece of equipment that is used in order to create profits for the corpse at the expense of being the profit of your life with a PH that actually allows you to get the PhD we're here to not be deceived by, but to actually learn how to believe in ourselves instead of that which we were told was better than what we actually are. Responsible, accountable, and liable are implied to be the same but are not equal. A man or woman acting within a corporation who has assumed an alternative status is not liable as a man or woman because the umbrella of the corporate entity covers their ass if they make an ass of you or me to assume while in the suit. To assume is to make an ass of you and me, and if they make an ass of themselves while wearing the suit, it's okay because corporately they are protected. The corporation acts as an umbrella, so when it rains, little red man here is an employee, so he's covered until he is no longer an employee, and then he has to stand in the rain on his own because he has full accountability, responsibility, and liability as the man who was acting on behalf of the corpse, because common law is based on common sense, which is rarely common practice nowadays. We have to cause no harm, loss, or fraud and keep the peace. And failure to do so leads to criminal complaints against a victim. And if there is no victim, there is no crime. And a victim actually has to be a man or woman that claims damage was done to thee. And if that one does not exist or cannot actually speak up with firsthand testimony, they were harmed or had loss caused by the act of the one that was in the position when they were covered, they're still liable even though they're under that umbrella. They just move out of it and lose their position, which is why so many executives lose their position when scandals come. The corporation doesn't protect them once their name has gone to a lesser standing and they're less valuable or perceived to be less valuable, which is why identity is such a commodity in this world. There is no limited time frame for calling violators of claimed common law rights to account. So you could have been harmed decades ago. And if you choose to bring those claims forward and you have evidence to support the claims that you are bringing into the public against the one you name, they then have to be themselves and defend themselves, or a lawyer can't do it if we actually stand on common law, because a lawyer is just a man or woman wearing a suit. But if the agreement or disagreement was between a man and woman, and the one wearing a suit tries to speak for one of the men or women but doesn't have firsthand knowledge and wasn't involved in the matter, they have no standing. Corporate entity covers those under its banner until stripped of their title, which is why the Nuremberg trials, I was just doing my job, is not a valid excuse. It wasn't then and it won't be now. We choose our role in the bigger picture. And coercion is the practice of persuading someone to do something by using force or threats. Permitted information in the court of law. This is where we get into the standing versus statusing component. Admissible evidence is evidence that may be presented before the trier of fact, which is the judge or jury, for them to consider in deciding the case. Firsthand testimony. Firsthand information or experience is gained or learned directly rather than from other people or from books. It's lived experience, which is the devil spelt backwards. We have to start breaking words down to be able to see the nuances of these things. Secondhand evidence is when a witness is not telling what he or she knows personally, but what others have said to him, which is not admissible in a court of law. So any man or woman that is using a template with evidence that is shared by all of the experts that have been putting forward such great information about damages and harm caused by certain experimental elements of the world that we're living in at this time, all of that, unless you know the source directly who is able to come into your case and speak into the evidence that you share, it's not admissible. Hearsay is information received from other people that one cannot adequately substantiate. It's rumor. It's similar to heresy, which is the holding of religious beliefs opposed to church doctrine. It's a belief or opinion opposed to a generally accepted view. The legal fiction is a fact assumed or created by courts, which is then used in order to help reach a decision or to apply a legal rule. The concept is used almost exclusively in common law jurisdictions, particularly in England and Wales. So here's the difference. These are used as synonyms, but they are not equal nor the same. A testimony is a formal written or spoken statement, especially one given in a court of law by a man or woman who has lived, and they know that information because it's a testimony of their life, a firsthand account. An affidavit is a written statement confirmed by oath or affirmation for use as evidence in court by a man or a woman acting in a position of power that actually then means if you need to have your words verified by someone involved in the fiction or fraud, then your word is not enough. Your word is not your bond, and that is dangerous territory to stand on. Common law capitalization and capacity. Here is where we start to see that common law is the unwritten and unlimited law unless changed and converted into limitations based on what's conveyed in the written form. So there are three forms of capitis diminutio, maxima, media, and minima. I didn't realize media is also a miner, which is a miner that you go in and mine the land and you are worked by the system, or is it mined? You are mined when you are a miner. So, minima is based on a change of status in your family. So it's consisted of a person ceasing to belong to the agnatic family related on the father's side without loss of liberty or citizenship. So when you marry, you change your name, for instance, which I wouldn't recommend or desire for myself personally, because ultimately you're just changing tribes and then you are minimally capitalizing yourself because now you're just changing the name that you identify with. But sui juris or sui juris is of age or independent, whereas alieni juris is under the control of another as a lunatic or infant. So these, we are born to our families and we are wards. They are our guardians because they have the right to speak for us until we are of age of majority. And then we have the vote or right to vote for ourselves, which is another thing altogether, given that if you vote for a representative to speak for you, then you don't have the final vote in your area no longer. Media, or is the minor version of loss of status, consisting of a loss of citizenship and family without any forfeiture of personal liberty. I believe that the media have been used to actually kick the ones that do not believe the same narrative out of the tribe, because the tribe has always been used to keep the individual in line. And then the ones who are the fringe dwellers, which fringe minority is actually a status that is owned by the creator of the status. So I wouldn't recommend accepting that status either, because that's dangerous territory. If you become a creation owned by a creator that has already imposed bylaws that are not in anyone's best interest. And then maxima, Capitis diminutio maxima, involved the loss of liberty, citizenship, and family, being made a slave or prisoner of war. Slavery is said to be illegal. However, if our person is made to be bound to corporate legislation and mandates that actually go against higher level constitutions and charters, then how are we going to actually call anything to account if we have lost it all and are in the belly of the beast and then have to get ourselves out of the trap which we are in alone? And when we are at the hands of ones that don't understand or believe what we believe, it is very difficult to prove our own sanity, which I experienced firsthand, and why I share that the OPCA litigant status conversion threat is very real. And I do share how I came into that uncommon insight in Fully Committed, which is a story you'll have to read, or you'll soon be able to listen to on Audible, iTunes, or Audacity. But in 2012, here's what you need to know. There is a man that is known as Justice Rourke that scripted the Meads versus Meads case law precedent that means if you use a freeman of the land argument or a common law argument, you can be deemed a vexatious litigant because the legal profession will always draw on case law precedents from the past in order to say why that happened last time and it was a good result for you to be subjected to too. And I say, no. Vexatious is an adjective meaning causing or tending to cause annoyance, frustration, or worry. And if you are purporting an alternative story to what the mainstream media, being a medium diminishing of capacity, that's dangerous. If you don't know how to not consent to the application of a status that would actually draw you into the public, where you would be hiding your privates trying to say that you are standing on common law when you need to also know how to claim your right to stand in your private capacity with all common law rights reserved at all times via lawful notice, that you then stand on the claims made in written form. These are the things that you can do if you know how to do it, which is why I went forward with this presentation, even though I seem to be alone in this moment. This precedent of the OPCA litigant status assumes the man or woman is following a guru who sold them templates and scripts used in their defense. Hearsay is not admissible. Any template that was written by someone else cannot be used by you, who is an original, because you are meant to create original content too. The application of conversion to a new status is called a novation. And a novation is the substitute of a new contract in place of an old one, which means you start all over again, even though you've done so much to defend yourself and your position in everything that led up to the application of a status you didn't know how to contest. Dangerous. Men and women with no firsthand testimony about a situation are able to discredit those involved, drain them of resources, and act without liability for causing real people harm. Event 201 laid it all out. And if you don't know anything about that, without a doubt, you can read it in my book or just the reference and mention of it. But you can go to the Johns Hopkins Center for Disease Control and actually see the simulation training they did before COVID hit. What would happen if there were to be a pandemic? Pan being all, demic stemming from demos in Greek, which means people, all people. If something were to hit all people, how would the corporations and the figureheads who were around that table, I don't probably need to mention the corporation names that had people around the table in that meeting, but you'll be able to see it for yourself if you go to the Johns Hopkins Research Center, their website for Event 201, and get that information. It's insanity, which is doing the same thing over again, expecting different results, but that's how black magic works. And if you think I'm crazy to start talking about magic, well, then you need to see the last slide that I wasn't going to show, and I'm not going to this time, but I go into a lot of definitions that you need to know, because we have been divided by the religioning of people based on the BS belief systems that we subscribe to and scribe to that which would tell us what to do. Know who and whose you are. This is not a competition. We all come from the same source. We all return to the same source when our life force is used up, and we go back where we came from and reflect on everything that we did while we were here. Which is why I will stand in my private capacity, and my claim is that I am a woman in my private capacity with all common law rights reserved at all times. So any man or woman who claims otherwise must make a claim in a court of competent jurisdiction, which does not include legalese, which I am not versed in nor competent in. Any man or woman who claims otherwise must make a claim in a court of competent jurisdiction that can provide an unbiased judge or jury to hear the matter. If the man or woman sitting on the bench passing judgment on my case is getting paid by the same corporation that the man prosecuting my case is getting paid by, how is that fair? And how am I going to get an unbiased trial where they will try all because they are colluding together to convict an innocent woman who is convicted of my beliefs? Conviction. Viction is a calling. Did you know? I shared in the book. Of course I do, though. OPCA litigant status. I do not consent to the application of any title, status, or personage. I claim addressing me otherwise is fraud, and all men or women are on notice in their private capacity in the charge against my person they have never gained jurisdiction over, are trying to move a false claim against me based on, and will pay for causing me harm, loss, and participating in fraud if they move this any further. And in fact, I've already invested more than a year of my life in order to learn this information because I've been learning as I go and use the notices that I know everything that is on there because I didn't use a template. I got tutelage from somebody that's been practicing privately, helping men and women for nearly 20 years to be able to clear their names, which it's all about the charge. Energetically, as energetic beings, don't we see the bigger picture? The power of notices. This is the definition by Merriam-Webster, which you'll notice it says compared to here, because when you make a notice, you don't reference their legislation, the corporate legislation, as if that was the extent of what you have access to. It's simply to remind them that you are aware of the limits of where they can go. And then you put compared to or CF, which is short for the Latin word confer, and instructs the reader to compare one thing to another. So this is not the limits of what a notice can do, but it is the definition that I can reference and say compared to the condition of being warned or notified. All men and women are on notice in their private capacity that I will not allow any suit to be worn to protect the man trying to take the boot to me, the woman, because I have claimed my status and not had it contested. So the power of notices, the reason I can speak with such conviction or with such fiction is because when I got locked up under the Mental Health Act, I was claiming to be what I am now doing because I learned this because of that. I just tuned into this version of me then before I had context or experience to be able to do it, which sounds crazy, but crazy by definition is different. And sometimes we just know things, which is called claircognizant. Clairsentience is clear sensing, clear feeling. Clear audio is clear hearing. You just hear things and it's like, oh, where did that come from? Am I going crazy? No. You're an energetic being. You are a channel. You are dialed in to the source that we all come from, and you just forgot. Clear visual is seeing things clearly in your mind's eye. Sometimes that happens too. And you can't deny it because then you get to experience it later and you call that deja vu. That's the spiritual element of this. And what we must start to realize is that when you're talking to people who are fixated and focused on the 3D, which is the literal reality that we live in, when you talk about the symbolic, mythic, and energetic layers that are all happening simultaneously, it sounds insane. It sounds like a competing reality, which is where a psychotic episode can come from. If you're talking about a different reality than what they can see because of their limited perspective, not factoring in the higher level energetics behind what we see, there is a relatability issue. They can't relate, they can't connect. You're not safe to them. So then they'll shut down. They'll close off. Their fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fornicate mechanism within will say, whoa, okay, no. Compared to when we actually make the information safe because we say, take this at your own pace. It's a lot of information coming at you. And I don't expect you to be impressed with this. What I hope is that you will be able to express what it means to you, what it means for you, and what you're going to do with it, and where your questions lie. Because when you ask questions, asking is how you become as king in your reality. To act honorably in good faith, you must give notice ahead of time. Ahead, when you get capitalized on, the head of the I disappears and you get boxed in top and bottom. Think of it. And then feel into the resonance of truth that I just shared. Let another man or woman know you believe a trespass has occurred via lawful notice. in written form. You give them time to respond. Unrebutted claims stand as true, and your notices are evidence you've acted honorably in your dealings by seeking lawful remedy. Hey, we've got a problem. I'm notifying you of it via notice. I'm mailing it to you or emailing it to you, and I've got proof of that because I've saved it. I'm building my case in these notices that I'm sending you and expecting you to respond to. Because a claim can be made against the man or woman causing you harm, loss, or fraud that is heard in a superior court of competent jurisdiction where men and women face off and the suits have to be taken off. For we only put on the suits in order to act so that we can pay for the life. In fact, we take the suit off in order to be able to go and enjoy. Yet, if there is no liability insurance, that umbrella will protect the man and woman acting until it doesn't. And it won't always, which is the insanity of why we need to wake up before it's too late. And we do that by actually putting a date on it, literally on your notice, which we're going to get into in the next page. But the I on the page reflects the I can see coming at me. These are the things we need to know about why notices are so important. The general structure of lawful notices. Put any man or woman acting on behalf of the corpse on notice in their private capacity. To the man known as their name, judging this matter. To the woman known as acting as court clerk. Put any man or woman acting on behalf of the corpse on notice in their private capacity. Take the suits off. There is no such thing as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. There is a man known as Justin Trudeau acting as Prime Minister of Canada, which is one corporation. And then there is a smaller corporation within that, the man known as Doug Ford, acting as Premier of Ontario. For instance, these are the public officials that people are trying to hold accountable with keeping their suits off, but they just take the suits off when they leave their position at night and they go scot-free, which is free to love and enjoy their family and the ones that they do what they do in order to love and be able to provide for in a world where inflation based on a fiat currency backed by nothing but the people's trust is paying. Yet their soul is paying and they don't realize it because they've been born for the role. We put any man or woman acting on behalf of the corpse on notice in their private capacity. There is no man or woman that was born a judge, which they will claim to be, as I experienced and witnessed in 2 trials or hearings that I attended. I witnessed a man ask a man acting as judge, "What is your name?" And he said, "I am the judge." And the man didn't know how to contest that claim. And so he looked lame. Whereas when I said, "What is the name of the man acting as prosecutor?" he said, "I am the prosecutor." I said, "You are the man acting as the prosecutor. What is your name?" Because he was not born that way, which means that is not his claim to fame. He doesn't get to be a prosecutor. He's a man that is prosecuting a case that is against me. And I have made a claim against him and his name because he is bringing a false claim into a public court against me. And it will be heard because he has 25 years experience bullying men and women into lower positions where he is moving false claims against men and women that don't know how to defend their name, and I'm going to do it for myself so that I can live through it and share the story, to tell the tale, to share the testimony that I lived through so that I could say it can be done because I have done it. And you can do the same thing. I am not special. I say this with this level of conviction, simply making sure that you are aware that I believe I have a calling to do this, which is why I am doing it despite how much it has cost me to do so, not just financially, on many levels. You bet your ass this has cost me a lot. But I'm doing it because if not me, then who will do what I believe to be true? And the same is true for you. Whatever is on your heart, you must do. Because if you don't do it in this life, if you have to come back into carnation, if reincarnation is a real thing, who knows? But consider this: if you don't do what you came here to do now, you'll have to come back into a reality where you didn't do what you were needing to do in this life, and you have to live in a reality where you didn't do it, which means it didn't get done, which means you are going to have to pay for the consequence of not doing what you came here to do now. That's my belief. Take it, leave it, work with it, modify it, shift it so that it works for you. If it does, leave it if it doesn't. But that is my belief as to why I speak with the level of conviction that I do. We have to include a case number in our notices because that is how they can file our lawful notices under the file of the false claim being moved against our name. We identify ourselves as a man or a woman and how we wish to be addressed. So I don't consent to the application of any title, status, or personage that is applied to me. I am the woman known as Laura. You can call me Laura J if you wish to. But for today, I'm just going to say, know who you are and make the claim. And then if anyone tries to say otherwise, that is fraud because you have already clarified who you are. And if you stick to what you submitted ahead of time before the head was lopped off of the eye, you can actually see the truth. And they have already seen it too, even though they may deny it. And then you say, for the record, let me read the notice I sent ahead of time. And if they decline, that is liability on them, as well as responsibility and accountability of the one that you put on notice ahead of time. This is how we take our world back, starting with our own, not needing to be the savior of all, just of our own lives, because it's the reality that we create. And if we do it on the micro level in our own lives, we can do it on the macro, because then every man or woman gets put on notice and they know if they are causing damage to another man or woman, they're going to be held to account, and it's going to be sooner than later. It's just currently we've been living in a world where later is the more probable answer. So it seemed worthwhile to wait, to just continue to do that which was corrupt, because who knows if we get another shot at this. So I'm just going to enjoy it now, is what many would say. Well, I say nay. Let's go back. We have to give a reasonable time to reply in our lawful notices. And then we have to provide the means by which a man or woman can reply to our notice, but we do it, put it into a box, because what is in a box is not on the form. Any boxes actually separate what is in the box from what is on the form. But we don't know that until we recognize the norm, and then we can work with it in a way that serves us instead of binding us to their rules necessarily, but that also protects us, because if we know, then we can work within the parameters of what would be beneficial to us without taking on the liabilities that they would like to apply to us. So just put your contact information in a box at the end next to your John Henry, your signature. But that's how we authenticate it. We reference legislation with compared to or CF, which is binding them to their rules that the corpse created for employees and ones who are subject to the corpse's jurisdiction to abide by. Not you who has a superior standing in the matter. It would be the equivalent of a manager of Burger King walking into McDonald's and trying to tell McDonald's employees what to do. They'd be like, no, I have a manager, thanks. You're not my manager. You have no standing in this matter. Get out of our store. This is what we need to get back to understanding. We're dealing with corporations and men and women acting on behalf of these corporations that are no better or worse than us. Their behavior just may be worse because they're acting against their conscience, against their divine nature. And there are many who are not. So we can't paint every single one with a broad brush and say they're all bad, because there is no all bad in anything, and there is no all good in everything too. We have to recognize that life is a buffet. We pick and choose what works for us, but we have to also recognize that we can't be causing harm, loss, or fraud to one another, because there is no us versus them. It's an us, it's a we. If we shift from I to we, illness becomes wellness. Malcolm X said that, I believe it was. Isn't that insanity? Boom. Emoticon. Okay. After we've authenticated the notice with our signature, which is called an autograph when it's by a living man or woman, instead of a signature, which is of a dead entity, which is the corporate entity, where we are incorporated into a larger corporate body, then we mail it and we wait the allotted time frame that we gave in the lawful notice to show that we are acting in good faith. If they respond to it, we have evidence in our claim, and then we can send another notice to contest the claims that were made by the one that responded, and we have a name. And if they don't respond, well, then our claims stand as true and are accepted. So that's what you do. It's the general structure of lawful notices, and don't use templates. Because if you use a template and someone else used it too, it's not an original to you, which means it's not admissible. It won't stand up. It has no legs because they weren't your own in the first place. And then claims can be made against you of being an OPCA litigant, which means your sanity gets questioned. And if you claim you're sane and someone else with a uniform that is of a higher status within the institution that is being mandated to inspect your sanity, and a psychological evaluation says that you indeed are insane, and you claim you are not, and there is no blame because they are just wearing a suit they take off when they go home to be with their family and loved ones while you're stuck in an institution. This is why that man or woman needs to have their suit taken off, so that they know if they make an order against you that causes you harm, loss, or fraud, they're liable. The color of law. This is where we have to see that our word is our bond. And if we stick to the notices that we send ahead of time and we actually go in there prepared, then if someone questions what we say, then we say it again. And we can be asked 3 times, from my understanding. And if we respond in the same way, our word is our bond. If we change the answer when they say, you said over there, where over there, and then you give more details, that's color of law. They're getting you to change your answer, even though they're making it seem reasonable. Well, where over there? I'm just curious. Well, if you change, it was over there, and then you give definitions, and okay, well, it was like next to this, and that changes. Your word is no longer your bond. So, how can you be standing in honor if you change your answer? Recognize how this works. What is the definition of color of law? My mistake. Under color of law, it is a crime for one or more persons using power given by a governmental agency, local, state, or federal, to deprive or conspire willfully to deprive another person of any right protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States. So it was an American page, lawnow.org, that I was referring to. But the United States is just one corpse. I happen to live in the country known as the Corporation of Canada, and then the Corporation of Ontario, and then the Corporation of Norfolk County, the municipality that I live within. So it's boxes upon boxes upon boxes, all of which have to uphold the legislation of the bigger box that they are within. Color of right is an excuse or defense for certain offenses. It denotes an honest belief in a state of facts which, if it existed, would be a legal justification. In cases of theft, it refers to an honest belief or mistake regarding the ownership of property. So under the common law, The term color of law refers to the mere semblance of a legal right. That is to say, that one's action taken under the color of law adjusts or colors the law to the circumstance, although the action may technically contravene the law. To color one's actions is to characterize or blend them toward legality, instead of lawfully abiding by laws that are relevant to all who stand on common ground, which is the common law, which is unwritten and unlimited until it is capitalized or hyphenated, which means that it's written and then it is limited. Changing your answer proves your word is not your bond. Stick to what is written in your lawful notices, send them ahead of time, and protect yourself. Not having done so means you're not protected, which is why just say no verbally is not enough. You are enough, your word is enough, but it helps to have evidence when you're up against a pirate ship with pirates at the helm who are trying to overtake the ship of you. Nuremberg trials and Nuremberg 2.0. The Nuremberg trials were held by the Allies against representatives of the defeated Nazi Party for plotting and carrying out invasions of other countries and other crimes in World War II. Just in case you're new to the concept of Nuremberg trials, there were 177 defendants, which is a status applied to men and women that were acting in positions of leadership within the Nazi Party. 24 were sentenced to death, 20 to lifelong imprisonment, and 98 other prison sentences. 25 defendants were found not guilty, and many of the prisoners were released early in the 50s as a result of pardons. From my understanding, there is a lot more to all of this, but we're going to save that conspiracy theory that leads to a giant conspiracy for another day, because that's not the point. A major problem with the Nuremberg 2.0 concept that I want to bring to your attention is the fact that Rainer Fulmich, a German lawyer specializing in corporate fraud, is heralded as the people's hero. But when one is heralded as a hero, others don't take action and think they're protected when that is not true. The same is true for Rocco Galati here in Canada. Everyone seems to think that he is some savior who is receiving a lot of donations to save the people, when the question we have to ask is, who is the oath sworn to that allows him to practice law legally? From my understanding, all lawyers that are practicing are either sworn to the bar or sworn to the crown, which mean that both are only able to walk a man or woman to the line, at which point the fraud that is the legal fiction would be exposed, and then they say, sorry, you're on your own, I can't take you any further. Subscribing to another's belief system gives you nothing to stand on except hearsay. When in hot water, you're threatened with unless you have direct access to the source of your claims. We have to take names. History is being made, and the majority won't even know it happened. We don't need the accolades, we just need to do it. And then accolades may come. But if we wait for the accolades, if we wait for permission, we forget the mission that each of us came here in order to lead ourselves through, and then say, yeah, we did that. The danger of pro-social lives, this is in relation to the myth of Santa Claus, and is just simply to say that if we seed lying early on, Robert Feldman, a University of Massachusetts psychology professor who studied lying for many years, said that the younger the child was, the harder it was for them to lie. The reason that we grow into lying is that parents show children how to do it. It's like when you wake up to the reality that Santa Claus is not real, that he is a myth, and that we were deceived, then you start to question where else you were deceived and what you can believe. And it creates a cognitive dissonance in our youth, that a pro-social lie is when we lie for the benefit of another. So we lie to children to tell them that Santa Claus is real and that the Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy, and if you're young and this is new to you, I'm really sorry. And yet, please do know that it is said with the greatest love, because I will not lie to you. Like the preacher said in the first meme, I will tell you the truth even when it hurts, because I would rather you know that I have done my best to be true than to lie to you and then tell you, oh, well, now you can lie to the ones that are under you or younger than you too. And then you get to feel like you're in the know. Well, that is a big no no, because currently we have a whole legal system that is upholding a lie, which is where liability has bought the men and women willing to sell themselves out to work for the devil as a devil's advocate. Devil is just lived backwards. We're not talking about some character wearing red tights and horns with a tail and a, whatever you call the little pitchfork. That's not what the devil is. The devil is just lived backwards. So if we stop thinking about things from a literal perspective and can actually look at them from a mythic perspective, which is the symbolic perspective, then we start looking at the mythic, symbolic, and energetic levels that are over top of the literal one. And that's when we get a greater picture of things. The professional sphere is based on climbing the corporate ladder by using others to get ahead, and political correctness prevents people from being able to speak the truth for righteous reasons. I hope that you have received value from it today. So, if you do have questions, please do let me know by going to ljeh.ca, which is my website, and you can sign up. I don't promise to have all the answers, but I will do my best to get answers I can't speak into from experience or from knowledge, which is the ledge that I know because I listen to others and then feel into the truth of what I feel is in their statements and claims, as we must all learn to do as we reconnect to the intuition that is within each of us. As the birthright, we each came here with our souls having hired guides ahead of time to guide us. The intuition, yes. I claim to be no one's guru. And this is not legal advice. This is lawful insight that I hope has proved to help you remember who and whose you are. For no one of us is as smart as all of us, especially when working toward a common goal. So be smart, which means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound with your notices. And then get them in. Stand on the claims you made in them. And then, if you need to take names for those who respond and make alternative claims against you, so be it. You can do so via claims in a court of competent jurisdiction. And I will also say that in September, I will be launching a special practice pilot program to help with empowering you. So I hope that tonight's presentation was insightful for you and not only gave you a lot of food for thought, but to also see that we have not yet lost the game if we are willing to change our aim and say, instead of aiming and targeting those who wear suits, let's just take the suits off and bring them back to being men and women and then hold them accountable, responsible, and liable for their choice to cause harm, loss, or fraud against their fellow man and woman, and then see how things change or if they stay the same, which in that case, I I just don't see it. I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe that if we take names, make claims, and stand on those claims as men and women, we turn this ship around and the pirates lose control. And that's exactly what I believe we need in order to be made more whole and call back soul fragments where we sold our soul to the devil in order to gain fame and accolades and that which can be stripped away with the identity that was not ours, because we are enough as we are. We just must reach the point of having had enough. And that's when the game not only changes, the league does too. Peace out, Lord J. Namaste. Namago for today.